Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to the series where I go through different RPG products that I have and give them a quick flip through and review. In this one, I'm going to be going through 3 very short adventures and talking a little bit about the different design philosophies involved here. All 3 of these adventures are intended to be short, or at least to present their information in very short form. And I really like how each of them does it, but they all do it in different ways, and I want to maybe just take a glimpse at each of them and see different ways of approaching adventure design. I think a lot of us are used to maybe a pretty traditional adventure design, and in fact, the last one that we're going to look at is pretty traditional, although it's short, in its presentation. But the first 2 are very interesting and different, and I like the way that they present themselves. So I wanted to cover it as sort of a, more analytical video and just talk about what I like about these sort of alternative presentation styles. The 3 adventures I'm going to be covering are The Sinking of Cathan, or Cathane, C''Thagn, Cathan, I think is how you would say that. I'm going to be looking at Malign Keep, which is a short adventure for Shadow Dark that was sent to me by Dark Pupil, who is the creator, so thank you for that. And then the last one is Milk, which is Quick Delve number 1 by Vasily Kaliman. For Old School Essentials. This is an official adventure scenario for OSE. So this is by Necrotic Gnome Press. And each of these is very short. This one's 22, this one is 3 pages, and this one is 2 pages. So it's not going to be a very long video in the sense of flipping through a whole bunch of pages. Now, don't worry, this one, if you're worried it's like a 2-page adventure, and it does cost money on DTRPG, but the preview on DTRPG gives you both pages. So I'm not worried about actually showing the whole thing, even though it's so short and it does cost money, because they do, the people who produce this, which, by the way, is Limithron. And I believe they're the people who create, and I think this is designed for Pirate Borg. It's the Morkborg whole thing, but this is for Pirate Borg. Okay, so I got this as part of the pre-release, basically, of all of the stuff from the new Pirate Borg box set with all of the alternate stuff, which I got and I'm very excited for, but we'll see when that comes. Anyway, let me look at this first and show you why I like this so much. So basically, you have a big map, and it's a really cool map. Not a lot of detail. I should say a lot of visual detail, but no writing, no numbers, nothing, just sort of the visual indication of this whole place. And then you get a description of the whole thing, including factions, locations, a few dungeons, the big bad, treasures to have, encounters to have, short descriptions of each of the places. This is a really cool way of doing a 2-page dungeon. 1-page dungeon in the map separately. This is really cool. A lot of information is packed onto this document. Now you might think of it as 2 pages because you could kind of divide this down the middle, and it would work just fine as a 2-page document, but really, this is a 1-page dungeon with a map. The amount of information that can be packed into this. Now, you might say, well, yeah, it's pretty small font, right? And so this is the choice that has been approached here. All of the information on 1 page, yes, but the font is very small, and to read it, you might have to even zoom in, or you might have to get close to your screen. It would take actually a little bit to quickly, or to, I would say, get used to looking and finding exactly what you need on this. But it's all here. You don't have to touch the screen if you don't want to, and if you have good eyesight, if you can read what's being read there, and I can. If you kind of look a little bit closer there, you can look, for example, under the encounters, which is in the left bottom of the screen, encounters there, and you look under Risen, and you look under number 7, you can see it's one unspeakable horror lurking in the ruins, summoned by the wretched. Now you have to actually be able to read that. Not everybody can, so this one is not easily accessible to those who have, eye problems or something like that, vision problems. But I think it's a great idea to put all of this information on 1 page, maybe a separate page than your map. You could have them both up. But the headings are big enough that you can, in fact, find what you need to find. And again, this is everything you need. This is treasures, factions, locations, encounters, the big bad, the dungeons and locations, and an overview, all in this 1-page spread. So I think it's a great presentation. Despite the fact that the font is very small, some people are going to say, no, I would rather have, right, and this is a matter of taste, but some people might say, I would rather have bigger, more legible font and a bigger document. right? So have an entire page on the factions, maybe make them bigger size so that I can read them all easily, and then I can just click through the PDF, or if I print it out or I get a print version, I have it right there. I don't need to zoom in on a particular part of the page, but that's a preference. And my point is, this is another way of doing the one-page dungeon, and I think it's a really cool way of doing the one-page dungeon. Having everything that you need and a lot of information, but just making the font very small. The headings are big, but the font is small so that you can zoom in and find the part that you need. I don't know, I think that's really cool. And maybe you don't even have to zoom in. Maybe if you are content at reading at this size of font, and with the particular font choice, then you can actually just leave this up on your page. Now, if you were to, I have a pretty big screen, and I have it basically as big as it can go. So if you had a smaller screen, you might have to zoom in or out or whatever like that. But if you work with an iPad or with some sort of tablet, then you can easily zoom in on the part of the page that you need, and you can just use sort of a visual. You can just get used to it, kind of like a visual design. I don't know. I think this is really cool. Now, is this particular form everybody's choice? I don't think so, for the reasons that I've mentioned. I think, again, some people are going to say, yeah, give me a bigger document, give me bigger font. I don't care if I have to flip through. That's fine. This is not something that I find terribly easy to read at a glance. Some people are going to say, this is great. This is exactly what I like. I like having one page where I can have it up, and I just can move my head around, move my eyes around, and find the thing that I need to find. I don't have to flip through it all. And again, if you have a tablet and you're using the PDF at the table, then this is very easy because you just have the one page up, and when you need, you just pinch, or I guess spread to zoom, and then you zoom out and go to the parts that you need that way. Okay, very cool. Very, very cool, the Sinking of Cthulhu. Now, when it comes to the adventure itself, it's, kind of eldritch horror. It's very much in line with what we see from Morkborg or Pirate Borg so far. I haven't seen a lot of Pirate Borg, but from what I've seen so far, this is right in line with it. There are cool factions, there are really cool treasures, it's creepy, it's dark, it's about this sinking city that's going down into the water, and you have a timer, and as the timer progresses, basically, it gets sunken, more and more sunken, until only one thing is above the surface, eventually. And also, so it's a double timer. The city is sinking into the depths, and the Great Old One is awakening. Now, it's interesting because the Great Old One that's being summoned is either you can roll randomly for the name and the abilities, or you can choose. But I think that's cool that the particular design here is both a short adventure, but also, what might you say, a very, very modifiable adventure. There's a lot of different options here. Like, this is a short one-page adventure, but it's actually quite a lot of information packed onto this page, and a lot of variation packed onto this page. Yeah, there are set factions, but there are tons of random treasures, and tons of random encounters, and tons of locations, and if the place is sinking, the players are probably not going to explore all of these. So you really have your choice here about how to create this. Yeah, there's one big dungeon with a bunch of, with one map of it, but you could create your own maps of all of these other locations as the players go through. They're indicated more than detailed. So anyway, I think the Sinking of Cthulhu, is it Cthulhu? I don't know how to say it exactly. Cthulhu is how I would say it. Cthulhu. But I think it's a really cool dungeon, and the map of it is great. That's really cool. Even if you don't use it for this particular adventure, you can use this map for any ruined city, and the players could explore it over some time, and that would be really cool too. You can make this like kind of an over dungeon, make this individual locations bigger dungeons, and kind of make this something like a mega dungeon. I don't know, I think that'd be super fun. Okay, so anyway, really interesting design there. The second adventure, as I said, is the Malign Keep, and it's for Shadowdark. It's 3 pages. It's much more direct, traditional, but it's also very, very short. And it's really only 2 pages, because the back page is just talking about short presentation and why it's good, and I think that's a really good thing. Maybe it should be a separate document, or it could be a separate document, I should say. Maybe not should be, but could be. But it's a great little bit at the end to talk about why present a short adventure with not a ton of information given in the background and all of this stuff. Another reason I love this adventure is the art. As you'll see, it's just Darkest Dungeon. It's so good. The map, it's a really cool map there. You get kind of an isometric three-dimensional map. You can see very clearly the height variations. Now, there isn't a ton of, how to put it? There aren't a ton of like alternate ways in, such that the height alterations would make a ton of sense. Like, one of the reasons I like having a vertical dungeon is because players can really get a sense of verticality, which is often lacking in two-dimensional dungeons where it's kind of everything's flat. And the feeling of going up and down, seeing, for example, down a balcony or over a balcony, and that's one of the values of having three-dimensional space and using verticality. It's a cool looking map, but you're not going to show it to the players, and so really it's cool for your sake as a DM. But that's not nothing, right? That draws you in, and it gives you a certain tone and aesthetic, and that's going to change the way you describe it, you feel about it, and you're one of the players too, so how you feel about your adventure is important. The adventure is pretty straightforward. You get a bunch of bandits who have decided they're going to reach into the dark world for more power, and have transformed a priestess into this horrible creature. And they're kidnapping noblemen's wives and preparing for a sort of ritual to sacrifice them all to gain a whole bunch of power, and to give a guy back his throne. So it's got a lot of different interesting elements there. There's some interesting NPCs. You have Marcus Lorne, you have Malia, you have Lubric Timber, who's a paladin, has been captured, and then you have the Ulomp tribe. They're interesting because they're a faction, but they can't, as it says here, they can't enter man-made places. It's sort of their thing, and so they can't really directly help you in the castle ruin because it's a man-made location. But they could help you in the surrounding region. If you interact with them, they might be able to help you out by providing a place to rest if you do need to retreat. Maybe you could probably figure out some way of working with them such that to leverage their numbers and their advantage, even though they can't actually directly help you in there. That's kind of cool. You have a very, very brief outside trek. It's just a few locations. Really, there's a road and then one off-the-road location, the Desecrated Shrine. And there isn't a lot of what I like about this presentation. Again, talking about small adventures with kind of unique presentation here. You have D4 hooks, but that's it. You're not given there's an obvious path, I mean, aside from the road, but there's not like, okay, you have to go to the Desecrated Shrine in order to get the key. What there is in the Desecrated Shrine is a hidden hatch that leads up to the castle. So if the players explore, they get a benefit from that. And of course, maybe in the valley they can encounter the Ulomps who can tell them about the secret tunnel or something like that. Or maybe they can they can find the Ulomps who are roasting the bandit. They rescue the bandit, and he tells them, hey, I didn't want to be there anyway, by the way, if there's a secret passage, or right, whatever you want. There are really interesting ways of expanding this. And I think that's why I like short adventures, and it's what this adventure talks about in the end. So I'm going to read through this why so short section, because I think it's actually quite good. It says this: why so short? The more information you need to sift through, the less likely you are to remember the important bits and convey them to your players during a game. I 100% agree. Having to page through the rulebook and consult long tables will also kill the pacing, and anything distracting you from focusing on your players is dead weight. Also 100% agree. Adventures like these have all the information on one sheet, so you can be confident you are not missing anything important, or in this case, 2 sheets, right? But basically, they are a great way for a new GM to get their feet wet. Also agree, but I think that it's actually more than that. Now, on the right, you have tips and tricks for running short adventures. And again, I think this is great. Or not just short adventures, maybe all adventures. But the idea here is, look, you don't need a ton of stuff to run a game. What you really need to do is focus on the players, have your kind of outline or bullet points or whatever you have, and then go for it. I really encourage that. Running a condensed adventure, going for it is so important. You gotta play. You gotta play the game. And obviously prep is fun for those of you who enjoy prep. I do. So it's part of the hobby for me. I like world building. I like coming up with cool dungeons. I like doing encounters and tables and things like that. But what I don't want to do is memorize. That, to me, is antithetical to me having fun. So a dungeon like this, or a presentation like this, is great. This is how I recommend people lay out their own adventures. For themselves. I'm not talking about publishing them, but if you've written an adventure or you have put something together, what I recommend is something like this, right? You have locations with some bullet points, and then you have some NPCs, maybe at a table. You don't necessarily need D4 hooks, because for your table, you're going to have your own thing. You don't even need to necessarily write down the background if you don't find it to be necessarily helpful for you, because you know all that. But you can write down your random encounters with some bits and bobs, like random names, which is what you see there at the bottom of the random encounter section. the bullet points for the locations, the NPCs, and maybe what they want, what's important about them, or a hook to remember who they are, like Lubric Timber is large and mustachioed. That's great. The Malia is goat-headed. She's a white priest's garb. She's a false saint. Marcus Lorne has a large nose, and he's draped in expensive garb. So those are things that you can easily, quickly describe. You don't need to do a whole physical description of the character. You can just do a brief one. The point here is not that this is exactly and only what you will describe to your players or what you will use. The point is that this is the skeleton of what you actually play at the table. Right? That's my point. This is the skeleton of what you actually play at the table. The adventure is not on the page. Right? The adventure is not written here. The adventure is what actually comes out at the table. The adventure is what actually happens when you and your players interact, tell a story, roll dice, kill monsters, or get killed, or they get killed, their characters get killed in the process. That's the adventure. This is the skeleton. So I think a lot of GMs, especially new ones, which is why I really appreciated what he said here at the end, which is that this is good for new GMs. I think a lot of GMs, especially new ones, think that the adventure is what is written, and that they have to convey that to the players. That's really not, at least in my point of view, that's not what it is. The adventure is what happens. This is notes. This is like advice. This is like your script, not even your script. This is like an improv script or something like that. These are points of inspiration. Even the things written in your adventure, even the things written down in your binder or your adventure notebook, those are just pieces of advice. Like, for example, if I have written in my book that, let's take number 3, room 3 here. It's damp and crude masonry. Torture implements strewn about, loose tiles riddle the floor. That's what I want to describe. But let's say I've decided that because for whatever reason I thought it was thematically cool to have it be a dark and stormy night when they're approaching, and so it was raining really hard, and maybe I want it to be more than damp. Maybe I've decided in the moment that it's actually puddles of water. Maybe I even want the room to be like ankle-high or knee-high water, and I think of that on the fly because, well, this is a sort of, ruined portion of the keep, and it's been pouring rain, and it's downhill from the rest of the keep, so maybe this is where the water rushes down to. And that's something that I thought of on the fly, say, and it just made sense with what came before, so I describe it. Great. That's the adventure. That's what the room actually is. I haven't failed because I didn't describe it as the document said I should. I've actually done what I should do. And the document said it was a damp room. Well, actually, on the fly, I wanted it not to be damp. I wanted it to be pouring rain. So, there we go. Right? In other words, this is a starting point. Even what you have written down about your dungeon. It's not true until you say it to your players. That's what I've always said. Nothing's true until you say it to your players. So your notes, your everything you've written, in my opinion, should be short and brief and thematic and get you in the mood, get you in the mindset to describe what you need to describe to make the best adventure for your players right then. Now, some DMs are much less comfortable with improv. They're not as good about coming up with stuff on the fly, either because they haven't done it very much or that's just not their style. Okay, great. Then for you, a longer adventure with more detail, with more things laid out, more paragraphs of text might be better. But I would encourage even those of you who do it that way, try something like this. Try some bullet points. Now, one of my viewers mentioned this in a video, and it's totally true. He said, well, I actually like paragraphs of text because sometimes I'm just feeling really tired or out of it. And when I'm feeling that way and I have like a bullet point adventure, then it can feel a little empty because I'm just not in it and I'm not describing things properly, and my players don't get a very full sense of the place because my imagination is just not working very well in that case. And so in those cases, I really like paragraph dungeons. And that was something I had never really considered before, that doing this kind of requires you to be on and energized a lot more. And that's, again, not everybody's preference. Not everybody's always on. Even if I start an adventure kind of tired, usually after the first 15 minutes or so, I'm super into it. I'm super energized. Running a game makes me really excited, and I get really into it. But not everybody's like that. So, know thyself, right? But I would say, for those nights when you're feeling really on, a dungeon like this, where everything is laid out very, very briefly, where you get the characters, the NPCs, everything laid out very, very briefly, where more is left to your imagination, and therefore to your on-the-fly description to your players than is laid out for you. Give it a try. So a dungeon like this, very, very cool. And once again, basically everything you need about the dungeon is on this one page. The background, the out, you can basically leave this open for the introduction, for the approach, and then you can leave this open for the actual dungeon crawl. That's great. That's super cool. I love that stuff. Okay, the third adventure here, Milk, is much more traditional in its design in that it's not 1 page or 2 pages. You're going to be flipping a bit, and you kind of have to keep maps open and things like that as you go through. Now, it's a really cool adventure. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. There's great art throughout if you know Necrotic Gnome. A really great art. The map is laid out really, really quite well. You can click on the room numbers and it'll take you right there. You see where the encounters are, sort of, right? You get golems and dwarves, merfolk, children, apprentices, golems, chocolatier, minions, all of that. The idea behind this adventure is that there were these merfolk that live in a lake of milk. Kind of interesting. And they, along with some dwarves, have been making chocolate for a long time, and it's the best chocolate anywhere. And then this evil chocolatier who makes pretty mediocre chocolate has decided that she wants to take over, and so she has come here and has taken over using skeletons and chocolate golems and things like that, or has made chocolate golems and stuff like that. So you have some variety in the creatures you're going to face. You have enchanted dwarves, you have undead servitors, you have golems that are under control in their chocolate, you have the chocolatier herself, you have the merfolk who are kind of helpless, although the merfolk king has gone kind of mad. And then you have the merchants who are here to buy. And then you have a big chocolate worm as well, which is good. You want not really a dragon, it's actually a worm. Great art there. All hail the chocolatier, goddess of chocolate. The layout is what you would expect from I would say Necrotic Gnome. Necrotic Gnome. Exalted Funeral, OSE official adventures. It's got the same font choices, it's got the same layout as those adventures do, as you see in something like Incandescent Grottos, or as you see in The Hole in the Oak, or as you see in the adventure anthologies. This is really cool right away. It says, a level 2 to 4 dungeon adventure with how much treasure you're going to get. Again, I guess especially for systems where treasure is XP, that's important to know. You get the faction breakdowns, relationships between the factions, and some general notes about the construction of the dungeon. What happens if you eat chocolate, for example. You have some great art here with the common monsters. This is one of the rooms where the merfolk queen is being kind of enchanted to sleep in this big bowl. And then you have the descriptions of the rooms. And again, you can see how it's laid out. It's very, very simple. You get a paragraph with the description, set aside in this color pink. It's kind of an odd color for these. I haven't seen that before. It stands out. You can certainly read it easily. You have a very brief description, and then you have some hyperlinking here, but then you also have descriptions of the room in further detail, right? So the things that are bolded, you're going to have more detail about that as you go down through the paragraphs. So you have a brief description and then more detail as you look forward. That's how you have, that's cool. Adobe describes it to you now. Or I think it's Adobe. Maybe it's just the actual, ornate spoon. So anyway, this is the whole adventure. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's 22 pages. As you go through, you're probably going to try to help the merfolk. You're probably going to try to stop the chocolatier. Who knows? It's a D&D. It's an old school D&D adventure, so you can never quite tell what players are going to do. But I want you to consider for a moment the difference between this layout, column text, which is really well laid out, column text, brief description of the room with some things bolded, and then further descriptions of those bolded things as you go forward. Think about what's more helpful to you, something like this, or something like this, which is similar, right? But instead of having columns, you have everything kind of bunched together, and so you're reading through it. The idea here is to be as brief as possible, whereas this one is brief, but each is given its own column. There's sometimes doubled up over here when it's a very short room or small room. Stat blocks are given on the page when necessary. You don't get that. You get that here. Excuse me. You get that here at the end of some paragraphs. Stat blocks given. So the layout is similar. Or to something like this, where everything is given to you on one page. Right. So in a way, I think of this as like 3 tiers of short adventure. This is the longest kind of short adventure and a very good design for that short adventure. This is middle, where you get most things on one page. In fact, almost everything's on one page, but you still get basically just enough to run the particular room or encounter you're being describing here. And then this one, where you get a ton, but very little information about any one thing. And so in a way, this is the biggest of the 3 adventures, but it's also the shortest. Not just because of the font size, but because of the level of information you're given. And so which of these is most helpful to you, right? That's kind of an interesting question, and I think it's going to be a different answer for every person. All right, so that's this video. I just kind of really quickly wanted to think about this and maybe present this not as like, hey, this is the way to do things, but as which of these is most helpful to you, which is your style. And to think about that. And I don't think there's like a, hey, this is the answer, because I think it's a matter of preference, and it's a matter of habit, and it's a matter of what your players like and what results at the table in your best game. And I think that's going to depend upon you as a DM. It's going to depend upon your players. It's going to depend upon your energy levels, what you're used to, your experience, all of that. But given those facts, which of these is most helpful to you? I think it's an interesting question. Regardless, I think they're all 3 great adventures. All 3. And I'll put links below to where you guys can get them. Thank you once again to Dark Pupil for sending me this. His name was Doman, I think. But for sending me this adventure. It's really cool, and the art is just awesome. I want more adventures in this art style, please. So please make more. All right, thank you guys very much. This has been Milk by OSE, an official OSE adventure. Malign Keep for Shadowdark, and The Sinking of Cathan, which is for Pirate Borg, Mork Borg. But all 3 are old school, and they're all 3 adaptable to almost any game. All right, guys, hope this has been interesting, and I'll see you all in another video.